Hello, my name is Smadar Goldstein, and I work with JETS, Jerusalem EdTech Solutions, and Israel 365, and I'm here to welcome you to a crash course on the Holocaust. Please join me, and please feel free to ask any questions anytime. You can email me afterwards at smadar@jetsisrael.com. Looking at the Holocaust, a lot of questions that come to mind. How did it happen? Why did it happen? How could the world have let it happen? And who were some key people who survived and contributed to the world? And what are their contributions, and how can we honor their memories? One of the main aspects we can take a look at is obviously the history. We all know Adolf Hitler and that he did rise to power. What was going on before he rose to power? What kind of climate was there in Germany and in Eastern Europe at the time? What does the word Holocaust even mean? The Holocaust, as it's written here, it's a word of Greek origin, meaning sacrifice by fire. And the Nazis did feel that they were a superior race. And many feel that, or seem to think that this started in the 1930s. But actually, it started way, way, way before. So let's take a look at some poetry that will introduce us to the topic. First, they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. This was written by Martin Niemöller, and it obviously applies to any race at any time. There have been many genocides in the past, but there has only been one Holocaust. But if we do not speak up when we see unfairness and injustice and genocide in the world, then we are doing a wrong to ourselves. When were these caricatures drawn, and what symbols can you see? If you take a look at these three symbols, these were written way before the 1930s. All of these are portraying Jews in a very negative tone. This was anti-Semitism in cartoons. You could take a look, I don't know if you want to take a guess when these emerged, but this was from the 18th century, a cartoon of Jews eating pork. And look at the looks on their faces, and look at their faces themselves. They kind of look like horror caricatures from an old Aesop's Fable type, or an old children's story. The bad guy, they certainly do not look warm and friendly in the way they're holding the fork and the knife. So there was a lot of anti-Semitism in the world. There has been for thousands of years, and this is from the 18th century. It did not begin when Hitler rose to power. It began way before that. Here's a cartoon of Rothschild, who was a Jewish philanthropist, 1898, showing Rothschild as an old and wild half-bird taking the whole globe, the stereotype that Jews take over the world. Here's the front cover of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, also in 1878. Again, Jews taking over the world, a pig on his head, the long, sharp nose, the caricature of the Jew. Look at the noses as in all these caricatures. In the 1930s, Nazis would go into classrooms and have all the children stand up and measure their noses, and that's how they would identify the Jewish children in the classroom. The Nazi rise of power in pictures. So if you take a look at, we might know with Germany was that morale was very low in World War I. They lost, and the morale was very low. Then there was an economic depression, and they needed someone to blame it on. Hitler rises to power. They find the scapegoat of the Jews, and Hitler's showing here, he's rebuilding a road in Germany, showing that he is the answer to economic freedom and building power. So again, it's a slow process, but it wasn't that slow. The feeling of anti-Semitism was in the air, and you can read a book later on that I quote, Hitler's willing executioners. Even in the late 1800s, there were philosophers and part of the elite society who wrote, what should we do with the Jewish problem? This is called, you're all familiar with the Jewish Star and the Nuremberg Laws, which was the first action of what would happen to the Jews. There were actual anti-Jewish laws at the time. So you could take a look at this thing link, and it has just additional information, and you can take a look at that in your spare time. Race theory, personal story about Gabrielle, another movie about the Nuremberg laws. Didn't define a Jew as someone with religious beliefs, but anyone who had a grandparent who was Jew, and the Germans look very closely at the family tree. So this was just the beginning of the lesson. The lesson continues on. It goes over, it talks about a video of the Nuremberg laws. It talks about Jews being unwelcome guests. There were signs that die Juden sind unbeckend Gäste, the Jews are unwelcome guests, which led to Kristallnacht. Common denominator here. The lesson continues about Jewish responses to immigration, those who stayed, those who tried to leave, the St. Louis, the Jewish problem. Then the Jewish problem was very clear. There is a problem, the superior race of the Germans. How do we get rid of the Jewish problem? Kristallnacht, the ghettos, ghettos in occupied Europe. Nazis began World War II and established themselves. Look at all these ghettos over here. And then the murder of 6 million. Once you define the Jews as an inferior race and identify them as the problem, then that was kind of a mental shift that they could make in order to begin calculated exterminations. This is how many Jews were there in the Holocaust before the war, and everyone can go on and vote. So you can vote for this one, or this one. This is the correct answer, 9.5 million Jews. And how many were after the war? And how many Jews are there today? We go over all this. How did most Germans and Poles react to Nazi edicts? We talked about this book. The Hungarians, the Poles were thrilled, really excited to participate in the extermination of the Jews, both economically, financially, physically, humanitarian-wise. The Jews were an inferior race in their eyes, and they were more than happy to participate. And then we go through the rest of the session, Einsatzgruppen, etc. There's a lot of survival testimonies, a personal family story, a member of my family and my husband's family, the aftermath of the war, what happened, and the people who survived. For the dead and the living, we must bear witness. Some fabulous videos, and of course, who is in Israel today and the relationship between Israel and Germany today. So the lesson comprises all of that. My favorite ends with my favorite quote by George Santayana: "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." I look forward to sharing more information with you about the Holocaust and other interesting courses. Thank you.